Right now, in the heart of Berlin, thousands of people are walking over a ghost. Beneath the trendy cafes of Mitte and the bustling platforms of Alexanderplatz lies a world that most people never see. A vast labyrinth of reinforced concrete, rusted steel blast doors, and chambers painted with eerie glow-in-the-dark stripes. Most people think World War II was a conflict of skies and streets, but as the Reich crumbled, the war moved into the earth. This wasn't just a series of basements, it was a parallel civilization, a second Berlin carved into sand and clay, where millions of people sought refuge in darkness while the world above them turned to ash. Today, we're going down. We are exploring the lost world beneath the German capital, the bunkers, the secret subways, and the final claustrophobic tomb of a collapsing empire. Berlin did not begin the war underground. In 1939, Nazi leaders boasted that no enemy plane would ever reach the city. They were wrong. By 1940, the first British bombs began to fall. The regime realized they could not stop the planes, so they tried to hide the people. But there was a problem. Berlin is built on swampy sand. Dig too deep and you hit water. To build a hidden city, they didn't just dig, they engineered around the earth itself. They launched what was called the Führer's immediate program. Overnight, the city became a construction site for the underworld. They built Winkeltürme, massive concrete towers shaped like sugar beets, designed so that bombs would literally slide off their curved sides. They burrowed 3 stories beneath the U-Bahn, creating deep bunkers that were essentially self-contained cities. By 1943, Berlin had more than 1,000 air raid shelters. But as we're about to see, shelter is a generous word for what life inside was really like. Imagine the sound, a low, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. That was the manual air crank. If the power failed, and it often did, the only way to breathe was for someone to turn a handle that filtered smoke and poison from the air above. The air was thick. It smelled of wet wool, unwashed bodies, and the sharp metallic tang of burned wiring. In many public shelters, the walls were painted with phosphorescent paint. When the lights went out, the walls glowed with a sickly green light so people would not panic in total darkness. But people did panic. Doctors at the time recorded a phenomenon they called bunker fever. The combination of vibration from the bombs and the lack of oxygen caused people to hallucinate. Some reported seeing the walls closing in. Others became violently claustrophobic, trying to claw their way back out into the exploding streets because the silence of the bunker felt more terrifying than the noise of the bombs. These bunkers were designed for a few thousand people. By 1945, some were crammed with 5 times that number. People did not sit, they stood, pressed so tightly together that if someone fainted, they remained upright, held in place by the crowd itself. To understand the human cost, you have to look at the Mutter-Kind-Bunkers. These were specifically reserved for mothers and infants. In the Winkeltürme, there are still rooms where you can see the remnants of nursing bays. Imagine a mother holding her newborn in a room where the oxygen is so low that a candle won't stay lit. They lived by the rule of the match. If you struck a match and it went out instantly, it meant the carbon dioxide levels were reaching lethal limits. There are accounts of bunker births, children born into this gray concrete world who wouldn't see the sun or a blade of grass for the first 3 months of their lives. For these children, the world below was the only world that existed. The rumble of the bombs was their only lullaby. While surface streets were choked with rubble, parts of the subway system were used to move supplies and military units beneath the ruined city. Secret blind tunnels led into government buildings. Hospitals were pushed underground, where surgeons operated by candlelight while muddy water dripped from cracked ceilings. There were underground telephone exchanges where young women directed what remained of Germany's forces by voice alone. These women were often the last to leave, staying at their switchboards even as Soviet tanks rolled over the ceilings of their bunkers. The city above was collapsing, but below it, a machine still tried to function. It was a machine made of flesh and concrete, grinding away in the dark. In January 1945, the most famous resident of the underground city arrived. The Führerbunker was not a civilian shelter. It was a command center buried nearly 30 feet below the old Reich chancellery. It contained roughly 30 rooms protected by concrete ceilings more than 12 feet thick. While civilians starved in public bunkers, this underground headquarters had generators, water tanks, and a kitchen. But comfort did not bring clarity. As Berlin was pounded by artillery, the bunker became a place of denial. Maps were spread across tables. Orders were issued to armies that no longer existed. Officers spoke into telephones that connected to empty fronts. On April 30th, 1945, the underground city claimed its most famous life. Hitler died in a narrow room with a low ceiling and a single hanging bulb. The shelter had become a tomb. But the story didn't end in 1945. When the war stopped, the Cold War began, and Berlin was split in two. The underground city took on a new, even creepier life. For decades, there were what Berliners called ghost stations. These were subway stations that sat on lines crossing from West Berlin through East Berlin. The trains would slow down, but they wouldn't stop. Passengers in the West would look out the windows and see dimly lit, frozen-in-time stations from the 1940s, guarded by armed soldiers in the shadows. These stations were the limbs of the underground city, trapped in a state of permanent haunting. Many of the World War II bunkers were repurposed during this time to survive a nuclear strike, adding even more layers to the labyrinth. As Soviet troops advanced, German engineers detonated sections of the S-Bahn tunnels beneath the Landwehr Canal. Water rushed into the corridors where thousands were hiding. No one knows the true number of victims. Some estimates say hundreds, others say thousands. People drowned in darkness, trapped inside the very tunnels that were built to save them. When the fighting ended on May 2nd, survivors crawled back into daylight. Many did not recognize their own streets. The city above had been erased. The city below was still standing. After the war, Allied forces tried to destroy the bunkers, but the structures were too strong. To demolish them would have destroyed entire neighborhoods. Instead, they buried them. They piled the rubble of ruined Berlin on top of the concrete fortresses, creating artificial hills. But the doors are still there. Ventilation shafts still rise from the grass. Subway walls still sound hollow when struck. Beneath modern offices, steel corridors remain sealed in darkness. The underground city was never dismantled. It was simply put to sleep. It stands as a monument to what happens when an empire tries to preserve itself instead of its humanity. Berlin hides its scars below ground. The next time you walk down a quiet street at night, listen carefully. Is that the wind moving through a tunnel, or the echo of a forgotten city waiting to be remembered? This is the Lost World. If you want to see the floor plans and rare photos of these mother bunkers, we've posted them in our community section. And if you're ready to see how these tunnels were used to escape the Berlin Wall, join us for our next investigation. Don't forget to subscribe. The world is much deeper than it looks.